this offseason. Russell Wilson, Aaron Rodgers, where they're going this season. One guy's staying, the other's on to a brand new team. It's Bo Brock, and it's the Locked On NFL Roundtable. Break down some huge moves that went down in the league. Cody Rourke from Locked On Broncos, of course, Corbin Smith, Locked On Seahawks, Peter Bukowski from Locked On Today and Locked On Packers, our guy Tyler Rowland, of course, Locked On NFL, Locked On Titans, Amp, Tony Wiggins, Locked On Jags, Marcus Mosher, Locked On Cowboys, Lauren Cox from Locked On Bears, and my co-host from Locked On Cardinals, Alex Clancy and Locked On NFL. We're breaking down these big stories today. Let's start with Cody Rourke. Please subscribe, by the way, to the YouTube page if you haven't done so already. Great daily content. And this is like the calm before the free agency storm. But Cody, Russell Wilson goes to the Denver Broncos along with a fourth-round pick. Let's not, poo-poo a fourth-round pick. But Noah Fant, Shelby Harris, 2 first-round picks, 2 second-round picks, and a 5th-round pick. What does this do immediately for the Denver Broncos?
Well, I think the conversation really has to put them on like, hey, how can they compete for a Super Bowl here? I mean, they have a playoff roster as is. And the real downfall here for this Denver Broncos team last season was that they just didn't have the quarterback play, the consistency to be able to do it. They couldn't even get the ball to their top pass catcher in Cortland Sutton consistently. There was a time where he went, I believe, a big stretch of the season, minimal catches, minimal targets. And then all of a sudden, towards the end of the season, he started getting a little bit more when Drew Lock got inserted back into the starting lineup due to Teddy Bridgewater's injury. But then Jerry Jeudy, you paid a first-round pick, obviously a couple years ago in the NFL draft to get him. He didn't have much production. He didn't have a single touchdown on the season. The offense was the big part that they needed to revamp, and now the Broncos could be very dangerous with Russell Wilson.
No doubt about it. Corbin Smith, the fallout now, picking up the pieces in Seattle. The Seahawks, they look like they're at the beginning of a rebuild now. What are your initial thoughts on the trade, and what's the legacy that Russell Wilson leaves in Seattle?
Well, I'll start with the legacy. Obviously, the best franchise quarterback the Seahawks have ever had. He's going to leave after 10 years here with all of the major records, the only quarterback ever to lead him to a Super Bowl victory, and they nearly had 2 in a row. So obviously his legacy is going to be one of the icons that's ever played in a Seahawks uniform. But as far as picking up the pieces goes, I mean, I know that this has been something that's been speculated. There's been tons of rumors out there the last couple of years, but it just didn't seem like there was going to be a trade that was going to match up here. And that included the Broncos. Like, I didn't see Drew Lock being a piece coming back. The Seahawks would be like, that might be a guy we can put at quarterback to replace Russell Wilson. But ultimately, my viewpoint, at least based on what I've been told, is that there are at least 1 or 2 quarterbacks in this draft class they were enamored by, meeting with them at the Combine last week. There have been some talks that maybe Russell Wilson wasn't going to sign an extension, especially now with Aaron Rodgers getting paid $1 bazillion a year. I don't know that the Seahawks were wanting to pay that price anyway, and so they decided now we're going to move on. And I don't think they're going to be viewing this as a total rebuild. They've still got talent on both sides of the ball. Yeah, they still feel like they can compete in the NFC West, but obviously now they've got a huge hole they have to fill, whether that's with a rookie, bringing in a veteran free agency. Maybe they go out and try to trade for Deshaun Watson if he gets cleared with his legal issues. All those avenues are open right now. And you could say it's going to be an intriguing, and fans would maybe say a scary offseason in Seattle trying to figure out what's next with Russell Wilson heading to the Mile High City.
Yeah, Russell Wilson wasn't the only quarterback news. Aaron Rodgers, he announced at least the reports conflicting maybe about what the new deal is. But Cody, was that something that kind of got this deal done between Denver and Seattle, that Aaron Rodgers made his future plans known earlier today?
I don't think that was necessarily the case. I feel like last week at the NFL Scouting Combine, the Broncos had conversations with representation from the Seahawks and also the Green Bay Packers. And I guess the vibe at the NFL Scouting Combine was that they knew that Aaron Rodgers was coming back to Green Bay, so they moved on to plan B, which was Russell Wilson at this point. And hey, look, you have to swing it, for the big fences to be able to try to get a guy like that. George Payton did so as well. And you mentioned, the trade assets that Denver had given up. Well, also including in that is Drew Lock, who's entering really the final year of his contract. He's really auditioning, I think, going to the Seahawks for a job long-term, whether it's with the Seahawks. Who knows? His trajectory hasn't quite been what many people had expected, but also at the same time, they have a lot of capital to be able to do that. Outside of that, I think this is a good move here for the Broncos, and, they missed out on Rodgers. And this morning, we all thought, okay, hey, today's the day we're going to find out, because they have to make the decision on the franchise tag here regarding Davante Adams. Well, the move is now freeing things up to where they can eventually sign Adams to a long-term extension in Green Bay. So it all worked out, I think, in the end. Broncos get a franchise quarterback. Packers get their guy back. All is well, for Packers and Broncos fans.
Yeah, for 31 other NFL teams except for Seattle. They're sitting there without a quarterback. Marcus Mosher from Locked On Dynasty. We see a lot of benefactors, especially on that Denver Broncos offense, from Russell Wilson going fantasy-wise. Who is actually going to make out very well from this trade, and then who probably loses a little bit of their luster? DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett, some of the guys on the Seahawks roster.
Yeah, let's start with the positives. I think it's got to be Cortland Sutton, right? Because Russell Wilson's one of the best deep ball throwers in all of the NFL. So we're going to see multiple of those Russ bombs down the field. It seems like every single game. And then for losers, I don't know if it's DK Metcalf because he was productive last year, even with Geno Smith. I think they're going to find a way to keep him involved in the passing game. For me, it's Tyler Lockett, right? He's the guy that had the best chemistry with Russell Wilson. He's the guy that was so efficient with him. I got to believe now that Lockett's probably somebody that Seahawks are going to consider trading. But he's got to be the biggest dynasty loser for today.
It's your Locked On NFL Roundtable. Please hit subscribe. Let us know what you think about this deal for Russell Wilson going from the Seattle Seahawks to the Denver Broncos. Guys, who won this trade? Tyler Rowland, you cover an AFC team that's in contention the last couple seasons. Who won this trade between the Broncos and the Seahawks?
Well, I think it's obvious up front the Denver Broncos won the trade because at the end of the day, at least in the short term, you look at it, which team gets better from this deal? And it's obviously the Denver Broncos. But, a lot of people didn't like what Seattle got back. But, I mean, that kind of package for Russell Wilson. And let's just have the conversation. I mean, Russell Wilson has been a great quarterback during his career, but he is a smaller quarterback who's getting a little bit older. Sometimes those smaller guys don't hold up as well. The Broncos, yeah, they have this great elite offense that we're talking about with these weapons that can now be plugged in, but there's still questions on the offensive line for Denver, and Russell Wilson, of course, is used to playing behind a bad offensive line, but they had weapons in Seattle. They have weapons in Denver, and both teams have a bad offensive line. So maybe not bad for Denver, but they definitely could use some improvements there. So I think ultimately you got to declare the Broncos as the winner up front. But, I'm interested to hear from Corbin. He talked about the options that the Seahawks would have to improve, but what do you think is the smartest way to go about adding another quarterback? Do you keep Locke and let him battle it out with, a Malik Willis or a Kenny Pickett or Matt Corral if you feel comfortable with him getting healthy in time? Really, what should the Seahawks do to make that quarterback spot competitive? What confuses me the most is the age of Pete Carroll. I just don't understand why an older coach like that would sign up for something like this. That just doesn't compute to me. I don't think the Seahawks can bounce back quickly, especially if they're talking about trading Tyler Lockett. It just where Pete Carroll is as a coach and where the team is now, that doesn't really quite make sense to me, even if I think the package is pretty solid in general if you're going to trade away a top-tier quarterback.
Yeah, I think that the big thing here is that, maybe Pete Carroll and John Schneider are looking back at 2012 when they brought Russell Wilson in as a rookie quarterback, and they might be thinking, we just saved some money. We can go out and use that money to invest in players at other positions and build our roster around a rookie quarterback. Or maybe it is somebody like Drew Lock that's still only 25 years old. Maybe a change of scenery, a different offensive coordinator. He finally figures things out. I would expect that he's going to get to compete against whoever they bring in, whether it's a first-round pick or maybe a mid-round guy or they sign a free agent. Unless they go out and trade for somebody like Deshaun Watson, then obviously that's your starting quarterback for the foreseeable future. But, again, I think that's a long shot that happens. They might be looking at this, hey, let's get back to what we like to do. Let's play Pete Carroll ball. Let's have an offensive line that's better. Let's get after it running the football. Our defense is going to be better because we add some pass rushers with money that we opened up. And maybe then we can be very competitive and win a lot of games like we did early in Russell Wilson's career when he was more of a game manager. So that's probably the viewpoint they have. I agree with you, Tyler, that I don't see how Pete Carroll, I don't know why he would bring him back if your viewpoint is we're going to rebuild and completely blow this up. I think the expectation is they're going to find a way to still be competitive, but obviously that's a huge hole now at the most important position in pro sports.
Yeah, and the last thing that I want to say here, sorry, Bo, is I just want to say this and let people, they say what they want, but I'm just not convinced that this move makes Denver, to the next level of teams. They're obviously a better team, but, you're losing Fangio as a great defensive coach. So, yeah, you got pieces on defense, but you're losing the coaching that was Fangio. I don't know if you can replace that. first-time head coach in Nathaniel Hackett. We don't know what we're going to get there. Like I said, there's still questions on the offensive line. I think the Denver Broncos could use, more pass rush as well with losing Von Miller and adding there. So I guess I'm skeptical on this putting the Broncos into the top tier of teams. I know there's a lot of moves to be made in the offseason, but I'm just not convinced. The Broncos won the trade on its face, but I'm not convinced that the Broncos are all of a sudden a top tier team that needs to be, worried. I don't know if they're even a top 2 team in their own division still.
It's an interesting debate. I mean, that division is just littered with a ton of talented quarterbacks. When you have Justin Herbert, Patrick Mahomes, and Derek Carr's probably the 4th out of 4. But let me bring on my Cardinals co-host Alex Clancy here, because the other teams in the NFC West, they have to be high-fiving each other today as they see Russell Wilson between 2012 and 2020. He didn't have less than 9 wins with Pete Carroll and the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, as far as this division goes, it went from a 4-team race to a 3-team race.
Yeah, it seems like it. And I mean, John Schneider getting draft picks is like Dwight Schrute trying to give out Schrute bucks at the grocery store. Like, it's not necessarily something that's really going to, or what we've seen in the past isn't necessarily going to translate. Now, I know that they're going to have a lot of picks, but this isn't like they've already had picks. They didn't have any picks, and now they do. It's like the draft day scenario. They traded back for all their picks. So, yes, it's a 3-team race. It's going to be interesting to see. There's 2 teams now that don't know who their quarterback's going to be starting week 1 of 2022. And there's one who, their shelf life with the Rams is a little bit shorter, even though they're coming off, obviously, a Super Bowl win. This is a rejoiceful moment for the rest of the NFC West as of right now. Now, they may not be done. Free agency, they may be bountiful, maybe bringing in a quarterback or something to kind of placate the fan base and from what we're seeing now. But, yeah, as of now, it's a win for the NFC West.
Yeah, not the only quarterback news of the day. Earlier in the day, it was Aaron Rodgers. The news came out that he was going to ink a huge, mega, history-making deal with the Green Bay Packers. Early reports, Peter Bukowski, 4 years, $200 million. Amidst all the Russell Wilson news, Aaron Rodgers sent out a delightful, nice, just polite tweet to everybody, saying that he hadn't, come to a complete deal with the Packers. But at the end of the day, he's coming back to Green Bay, likely going to finish his playing days in a Packers uniform. And then Devontae Adams gets franchise tag. Banner day for the Packers.
Yeah, and this was, to me, always the most likely outcome. I've been saying that since about October. I thought when the news broke and in last April about the drama, and he's never coming back, Adam Schefter, all of that stuff, I was like, okay, this is really, really bizarre. And then he gives that epic press conference. He goes on that 8-minute rant about feeling wanted and all that stuff. I was like, okay, this is it. This was the last dance. And then he beats the Bears. And he's screaming, I own you. And to me, that was the turning point. And I'm not just saying that because Lauren is on our stream. That really felt like a different thing. And it was after that game, you may remember, he said he didn't feel walking off in Chicago like that was his last Packers-Bears rivalry game. Well, Justin Fields is the quarterback in Chicago for the foreseeable future. So unless he's going to Chicago, he was going to be the quarterback of the Packers. Now, that's not enough, of course, but that was when I started to feel like it was heading in that direction. This is a move that makes sense for both sides. Aaron Rodgers is going to apparently make this cap friendly for the next 2 years. He's going to get hella paid, which, by the way, Kyler Murray's agent really happy about. Lamar Jackson, who doesn't have an agent, really happy about it. And this is going to have ripple effects beyond just him. He might try to paint it as if he took the most money, that he's doing it for those kinds of guys. Come on. It's not about the money, but it's always about the money. To some degree, it's always about the money. So this was the most logical outcome. And Aaron Rodgers has said over and over, he wanted to be Tim Duncan. He wanted to be Kobe Bryant or Dirk Nowitzki and play his whole career for one team. It means something to him to finish his career with Green Bay. I think one of the reasons why the vitriol got turned up to an 11 last spring is because he was so genuinely hurt by the way that he felt like the team that he loved was treating him.
Lauren Cox is turning himself into a meme down the chat here. I mean, as Alex and I talk about the NFC West rejoicing that Russell Wilson exits, Aaron Rodgers isn't going anywhere. Your thoughts on Rodgers staying in the NFC North?
I guess the denial in me says, well, it's only 2 games on their schedule, right? There's 15 other games that make the big difference in how things are going to go. And if they meet Aaron Rodgers in the playoffs, he hasn't necessarily shined in some of those playoff opportunities. So it's not the end of the world for Chicago Bears fans. It's just sort of, status quo, continuing sort of where things have been for him and for this organization. So yes, it sucks, but I can't help but feel like, okay, you buy yourself a little bit more time with Rodgers, but then what happens 2 to 3 years from now when Green Bay is looking at their next contingency plan? Because with Rodgers, right, for him, it wasn't exactly about the money. Like Peter said, it's not about the money, but it's also about the money, but it wasn't fully about the money. It was about say in the organization and respect and having feeling like the team wanted him. But 2 or 3 years from now, the team's going to have to eventually have another contingency plan. If they draft another quarterback, if they start to have other ideas, does Aaron Rodgers get upset again? And all of a sudden, is it not about the money again? And do we do this? I'm not totally convinced that all problems are solved through the day Aaron Rodgers retires.
Well, maybe Aaron can go and coach the team that he owns. Maybe the NFL will make a special exemption so he can do that.
$153 million guaranteed, and Rodgers kind of debunked it a little bit. What's his number really going to look like here in 2022?
So if the Ian Rappaport reporting on the contract is right, now we know that he walked back the numbers a little bit. So, but what he did say after he did that was that the cap hits this year and next year are not going to be crazy, and especially next year, 2023. He said Aaron Rodgers is not even going to have a top 10 cap hit in the league at the quarterback position, which means it'll be like $30 million, which is crazy for a guy who's apparently going to get $50 million or something close to it a year. How? Cap shenanigans, basically. And because the money is all just sort of movable anyway, they will probably do things that they hadn't done before, and that is there'll be big signing or roster bonuses in the future. They'll guarantee money in the future that they can then move back out. And then in 2024, 2025, those numbers balloon, he'll retire, and Green Bay gets that money off of his books in a time when the salary cap, presumably, unless we do another one of these pandemics, which let's hope we do not, the money is going to keep going up and up and
right.
up. So.
It's a shameful that we're only getting to Tony Wiggins right now, over 17 minutes into our broadcast. It's a Locked On NFL Roundtable as we talk about the Russell Wilson deal between the Broncos and the Seahawks and Aaron Rodgers, Devontae Adams. It's not the last dance. It's Save the Last Dance this time around. I don't know what it is. Tony, between these two big moves today, which one's going to impact as far as who's going to win the Super Bowl in 2022, 2023? Denver, Green Bay, their moves, who are you picking?
If you give me that choice, I'll take Green Bay because they're staying the same, and continuity is extremely important. Although this year that didn't prove to be the case, but I just want to let everybody know they're like, why does Jaguars got here? Well, because they were talking about rebuilding, so we've been stuck in rebuild. Our tires are stuck in rebuild down here, so that's why I'm here. But the thing is too, I wanted to comment on. I heard some things and saw some things on social media that made my head want to pop. Folks were saying this makes Russell Wilson the third best quarterback in that division. That's arguable because this is not boxing. He's not going to have to Herbert one-on-one. Justin Herbert has been in the NFL for 2 years, and they haven't sniffed the playoffs, okay? And this time last year, once the trade was made for Matthew Stafford, he was considered the third best quarterback in the NFC West. And what happened? He won the Super Bowl. Football is the ultimate team sport. But it's the ultimate team sport that you're kind of doomed if you don't have one of the 10 best quarterbacks in the league on your team. So that's why I think this is huge for Denver. Denver was super competitive last year in a lot of games. And guess what? They had Teddy freaking Bridgewater and Drew Lock. I think the disrespect to Russell Wilson, when you think about the fact that he does have a relationship with Nathaniel Hackett, if I'm not mistaken. He may or may not, but I think they still come from that same tree of that West Coast offense. The other thing is they have 3 very good receivers. When your team is constructed already, a lot of people say you don't get a quarterback. And by the way, Corbin, I think the guy that they fell in love with is that kid from Liberty, because that would be doing Russell Wilson part 2, and it's something that they have experience in. But for me, when your team is already built, especially in the secondary, especially along the defensive line where you have pass rush and guys outside that can make plays. What else is there to get than a guy who's a borderline Hall of Fame quarterback, if not a Hall of Fame quarterback already? And if you have questions about the offensive line, as long as he's mobile, that's fine. It's not like he's a statue. I think this is a win-win situation, and I think this is a 5-year plan at least for Denver, because I don't think Russell is anywhere close to being at the end of the rope like Peyton Manning was when he went to Denver.
It's not like Russell Wilson doesn't have experience playing behind shoddy offensive lines.
Come on, man. Come on.
That's all he
But
has
he's a
experience
smaller
in.
quarterback who's getting older. Yeah, when he was in his
Well,
late 20s, he
correction.
could run around and do a bunch, but now he's getting older. Can he last 5 years behind a bad O-line? Now, compared to younger?
Correction. He's not small, he's short. And there's a difference because
Fair,
if you
fair,
see
fair.
him,
I
he's
know,
built
I
like
know.
a powerhouse. So the difference is he's not short, and because he's been mobile and agile, he hasn't taken a bunch of direct hits. He hasn't been beaten, bruised, and battered and scarred. You know, he invented running out of bounds and sticking the ball out across the line. So I think he'll be fine, and I think Denver, when you have a chance to do what they've done, I'm just blown away at the fact that this might be the second time in recent memory that they go out and get a dude like that, even though he's not Peyton, but he is a winner. He has just as many Super Bowl championships coming to town than Peyton had when he came to town. So I do think it's important that they built that team the way they built it, and now they're going in this direction.
Well, let me ask, like, Cody, because I want to ask really quick, which team has mortgaged their future more with this move? Like, and I know that the picks are the easiest way to say it because the future is now given away in theory, but that salary cap is going to make what New Orleans did look like they didn't do it when the cap hits Green Bay. And then, Devontae Adams, I'm sure he's going to get an extension and everything. But that team, when Aaron Rodgers leaves, is going to be decimated seemingly. And with Russell Wilson, like, it's completely different. But which team do you think has less of a future once these contracts are up?
It's tough to say. I mean, you look at Green Bay, and they're going all in with Rodgers. They're looking to bring back Devontae Adams. You mentioned they're going to be two of the highest paid players at that position. I mean, obviously, Rodgers will be the highest paid quarterback ever. Adams could be the highest paid wide receiver ever there. You factor that in, and, how do you preserve the defensive side of the ball? Denver's got a lot of young guys right now on rookie contracts. And one thing that we know with the introduction of sports books and betting into the NFL, unless you're Calvin Ridley here, he's excluded from this conversation. You have this whole dynamic where the NFL salary cap is set to rise exponentially almost every single season. I mean, this year it's going to be $208.2 million. We know, especially looking at teams like the New Orleans Saints, the LA Rams, who've been able to manipulate the cap, the Kansas City Chiefs, for example, with the contract they did with Patrick Mahomes and the playmakers they have at receiver with Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, and they're about to do another deal with Tyreek Hill as well on a 4-year, $85 million, more than likely. You can manipulate that and you can push things off. And obviously the whole voidable years contract thing is there. I do want to make one point, though, to Tyler's notion here. I don't think that the Broncos have a bad offensive line. I think they have some questions specifically at center and right tackle. And they've got some moves in place that they're looking at to seeing if that pays off. But how much money, and Corbin, you can answer this, how much money does Russell Wilson spend on his body with not only just chefs and nutritionists, but also people that are working? He's got a trainer for his left hand, a trainer for his right hand, and everything else. Like, this is a guy that takes his preparation serious. He's a true businessman, too, at the end of the day, who has ambitions of owning an NFL team. He wants to play long enough to be able to do it. And heck, he even said on the Manicast this year, he can still play another 10 years, he believes. And if that's the case, man, I tell you what, he's going to have to keep maintaining that. But yeah, he can't take a lot of damage along the way. But like Tony said, I think some of the moves that Denver has with him being mobile, this is going to be an offense that's predicated off of being able to roll out, throwing on the run, and getting the ball to your hands quickly. Maybe he doesn't take as much damage. So a lot to ponder there.
Don't forget
unlimited.
What's for Cody's thing here? Because I do know how much Russell spends on his body. $1 million.
Yikes. All right. Well, it's been a crazy day. Obviously, we had a couple of other deals go down. Mike Williams, wide receiver for Los Angeles Chargers, signs a 3-year, $60 million deal. You've got 8 players that were franchise tagged. A couple other big receiver names outside of Devontae Adams, Chris Godwin. A trio of tight ends signed the tenure or tagged with the tenure for close to $10 million. And then just before the weekend, we had a couple, like Saquon Barkley's name comes up. Anybody got an opinion on what the next big NFL domino to fall? And is it going to happen before free agency next week?
Yeah, I do. And I don't think that it's going to happen before free agency next week. But as we know, we've all just sat here and talked about for 20 plus minutes about the quarterbacks. I think who fills the quarterback position in Washington? I think they're aggressive. they're looking for somebody. Watson's legal situation may get some sort of resolution or clarity on Friday with some proceedings he has to go through. Do they look for a free agent guy like a Jameis Winston or a Mitch Trubisky and go that route? Or do they still look to make a trade? I know that we've talked about all of the logical trade candidates at quarterback, and the list is kind of whittled down now. But if Washington is seriously aggressive, as all the reports indicate, then we may get a surprise trade that we weren't expecting that could rock the NFL again. So I think that Washington is their quarterback position and what they want to do as a franchise. I think that's kind of the next biggest domino that could fall. I could see a guy like Jimmy G going there as well. And I don't think there's any coincidence here that we got reports today that Jimmy G had successful shoulder surgery, because I think the 49ers would like to get him traded sooner rather than later for clarity in free agency and clarity in the draft. So I think while it didn't happen today and it's not quite as big of a name, somebody filling that spot in Washington via trade could be the next big domino to fall that kind of has this kind of ripple effect in the NFL.
Tony, the expectations for a second-year quarterback, they've risen. I mean, we've seen guys take home some hardware in that season. Trevor Lawrence trying to bounce back from probably his toughest year of football in his career. They've got cap space. Is Jacksonville going to be aggressive next week? Could they be one of the teams getting one of the next big dominoes?
They say they're going to be aggressive, but when you look around at all the franchise tags, you wonder who they're going to get. You know, you could be aggressive all day and just not get anybody. I can be aggressive in a soup store that doesn't have a big and tall section, and I'll come out of there with nothing. You know what I'm saying? So my thing is by the way, I think the next big domino might be Matt Ryan. We talked about that on Locked On NFL on tomorrow. Matt Ryan makes all the sense in the world to go to Washington and play up there and allow Atlanta to get off to a new start. So the thing is, for me, is yeah, they say they're going to be aggressive. They said they're going to look into the tight end market, and here they tagged Cam Robinson again today at $16 million a clip. So it now looks like they're going to take Aiden Hutchinson in the draft. And I've heard for weeks, I even put it out on social media that I heard a rumor, and I told some people in Mobile that I heard a rumor that they're in love with Aiden Hutchinson. And I think because he measured in 2 inches taller than anybody thought, that they really fell in love with Aiden Hutchinson. So it looks like they're going to be super aggressive. Maybe they go into the secondary market and get Cedric Wilson or Christian Kirk, guys like that can play in the slot and can create some separation, because the Jaguars were absolutely too slow at wide receiver. I might as well. You could have took me and Clancy. Well, no, not Clancy, but me and let's see, one of you other guys, and we could have gone and played wide receiver for Jacksonville last year.
Unbelievable stuff. It's been fun to just crack the mics for our NFL Roundtable. Of course, the biggest news from the day, the Packers getting Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams back. Of course, Central Listening is going to be Locked On Packers with Peter Bukowski, Locked On Broncos with Cody Rourke. What's next now that they have Russell Wilson in the fold, and Corbin Smith from Locked On Seahawks? How the Seahawks pick up the pieces. Where do they go from here? The biggest stories, local experts in the biggest stories. We've got it handled here on the Locked On NFL podcast. Make sure you're subscribed for great daily content coming your way all off season long. Gentlemen, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody for listening, tuning in, and commenting. And we'll talk to you guys soon right here on the Locked On NFL podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.